Hello and welcome to Digital Transformation for Humans with your host, Amy. In this podcast, we delve into how technology intersects with leadership, innovation, and most importantly, the human spirit. Each episode features visionary leaders who understand that at the heart of success is the human touch, nurturing a winning mindset, fostering emotional intelligence, and building resilient teams. Today, we are going to talk about transformation in banking and FinTech and take a closer look at how to activate strategy and resources for high impact. Stijn Ceelen, a seasoned and result-driven C-level leader in Banking and WealthTech, managing director, CEO, and advisory board member from Belgium, is our expert guest today. Welcome, Stijn. It's such a great pleasure to have you here.
Thank you, Amy, for having me here.
We can start the conversation and transform not just our technologies, but our ways of thinking and leading. And if you are interested in connecting and collaborating, find more information in the description. Subscribe and stay tuned for more episodes. Stijn, to start our conversation, I'm sure you have so much to share about your career path, about your transition. Now you are such a successful business owner. You have been through the corporate world and climbed all the way up. So please share a little bit more about your story.
Okay, my professional career started in 2001. I worked for a couple of established financial institutions in Belgium in different domains like risk management, institutional sales, corporate strategy, even wealth management. But in 2017, I took already a huge decision to say farewell to the traditional banking sector. And I moved to a FinTech player, Bank, which was an online broker from the Netherlands, but also active in Italy, France, and Belgium. And I led the Belgian activities for a couple of years. Unfortunately or not, but Bank was acquired by Saxo Bank in 2019. And I decided to take a new role, and I moved for 4 years to Copenhagen to develop a new digital WealthTech solution for Saxo Bank. But then at the end of 2023, so last year, I decided to come back with the family to Belgium. I started my own business called Alkiemist Advisors. And at this moment, my main assignment is being the chief investment officer of a single family office in Belgium. For me, the most important reason I took that decision is because I wanted to reconnect with my passions, which are trading and investing. Unfortunately, in the corporate world, I felt entangled by corporate politics. A lot of time went to meetings, stakeholder management, strategic alignments, etc. I know it's crucial, but I really want to reconnect with my passion. And the second reason is that I want to have a very direct impact on the things that I was doing. In the corporate world, most of the time your influence or impact is not that big, or it is indirect. Now as a business owner, all the decisions you take have a direct impact on not only on your own life, but also the lives of others. So that was, in fact, the second reason that I moved away from the corporate world. And I still love it. So
amazing. I admire your courage, and it's always so inspiring to see the real life stories when successful leaders take that leap of faith in order to realign with their inner power and activate all the gifts and feel happy in life instead of being just somewhere they don't belong to, or they feel that they can't expand in the way they would like to expand. So that's just the first lesson to everybody who is listening to us today and is watching this interview before we get down to business. And let's start with the first question. Can you share key strategies that have been effective in driving high impact transformations in the banking and fintech sectors?
Of course, and I think the most important one is a focus on digital transformation. It's simple, but it's true. If you really allocate your resources to building a robust digital infrastructure, adopting cloud computing, integrating advanced technologies such as artificial intelligence and machine learning, basically, if you make all those investments and you have a real focus on digital transformation, you will be successful. If you do it on top of your existing business, it's going to be much harder. Unfortunately, that's what most of the banks or established banks are doing, is they keep focusing on their main business, and they see digital transformation more as a nice to have instead of a must have. I think the next critical strategy is, of course, fostering a culture of innovation and agility. Even if you want to invest a lot of money in a digital transformation, but you have a culture that is not really open for change, new innovations, agility, then it's going to be really hard. So it's not only about the money and the technology, it's also about the people that need to implement it. And if people really embrace a culture of innovation and agility, I think the success of implementing digital transformation will be much higher. If I focus a little bit more on fintechs, then I think that a lot of fintechs are successful because they really have a focus on customer centricity. The good thing about a fintech is that most of the time they don't own the complete customer journey. They only focus on a single touch point within the customer journey, and they really want to improve the customer experience in that touch point in such a way that people are blown away. And that's really customer centric. And some fintechs were very successful in introducing new ways of being customer centric. And then, of course, a last one in my opinion is, instead of fighting new regulations, basically you should be proactive and you should embrace new regulations and be proactive in terms of compliance. So try to be compliant as quick as possible. Try to do it in a very customer-centric way. I think will be much more successful than trying to fight new regulations and always pointing to the regulator as the bully who is not willing for banks to build client-centric solutions. No, take it into account, integrate it in your solution, and make it as client-centric as possible.
Sounds great. What are the most critical resources that organizations need to successfully activate their transformation strategies?
Yeah, I think, of course, the most important one is just financial capital. If you don't have the money to invest in these kind of transformation strategies, it will be really hard. Of course, as I told you before, it's not only about the money, it's also about the people. First of all, you need skilled and knowledgeable employees, because those people are the backbone of any successful transformation. You also need, of course, access to all these advanced technologies. If you don't have access to new technologies, then of course it's going to be hard to digitally transform your business. And what I also said to other people, it's access to data points. Banks, most of the time, they have huge amounts of data points of all kinds. but the problem they face at the moment is that it is not well structured. So they should first focus on some kind of database framework, restructure their all those data points, because those data will be essential for implementing new things like artificial intelligence and machine learning. So it's not only the lack of data, but also the way all those data points are restructured, which is quite essential. Another one is, in my humble opinion, a strong circle of partnerships. Don't believe that you can implement everything yourself, that you can build everything yourself. It's like, no, do some kind of strategic assessment whether you should build it yourself or you should rely on a partner who's really focused on that specific solution. And what a wise man once told me is like, stick to the core and expand the periphery. It's like, stick to those things where you're very good at. But from the moment that you see other players in the periphery that can help you, just try to bind them to your company through a strategic partnership.
That is so wise. Just that advice, it is something what makes whole interview forward worth to listen and share with your friends, family, and colleagues. So please share the link. Sharing is caring. Stijn, jumping back to our conversation, could you provide an example of successful transformation in the banking and FinTech sectors, and tell a little bit more, explain why it became successful and what made it successful?
I'm going to give you an example from Belgium. I know there are a lot of examples, but the reason I will talk about this specific example is it's not only about technology, it's not only about money or smart people in the boards drawing some brilliant strategy. I took this example because it's also some kind of interplay between strategy and culture. And now I'm talking about KBC, which is an established bank in Belgium. And basically they were struggling after the great financial crisis. They had a lot of CDOs on their balance sheets. They were almost bankrupt, but they were saved by the Flemish and federal government in Belgium. And of course, those days, people working for banks, they were really ashamed. It's like, they were called banksters. People were not even mentioning their roles at, neighborhood barbecues, because they didn't want to tell people that they were working for a bank. And the new CEO, he came up with a new strategy, which was all about digital transformation. But in fact, instead of focusing on the strategy, communicating it to the financial world, financial analysts during earnings calls, no, he did, in fact, the other way around. He was first focusing on culture. He wanted to establish a new culture of innovation, people that were proud again on the things that they were doing at the bank. A culture based on agility. That was the first step. Then he was wondering, okay, what kind of organization do I need for those people? So he changed the organizational model of the bank. And then, of course, he said, okay, now I have the two most important ingredients to make a strategy successful. I have the people that are backing me. They're now working in the most ideal circumstances because I changed the organizational model. And then I think it was 2015, 16, then he came with his new strategy to the outside world, which was based on digital transformation. But because the culture changed, because the organization changed, it was just a matter of time to implement the new strategy and the whole digital transformation within that bank. So in my humble opinion, it was one of the most brilliant things that he did. Instead of focusing on strategy, organization, culture, he said, no, I have to do it the other way around. First, I'm going to focus on culture, then organization, and then a new strategy. Because as they say, culture eats strategy for breakfast. So without the right culture, you cannot make a strategy successful.
So true. Actually, culture can eat up anything for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And that's why it is important to pay attention to your culture and work on it before you start moving forward if you want to unfold success. You already touched down on the topic of innovation and technologies, but could you tell a little bit more? What role does innovation and latest technologies, and let's take a closer look at AI and blockchain. What role do they play in the transformation strategies of banks and fintech companies?
Yeah, and I really want to make a distinction between banks and fintechs, because most banks, in the end, although they claim differently, they're really focusing on operational efficiency. I think in earning calls, I think cost income is one of the most important metrics that is discussed. So it's all about operational efficiency, while fintechs, as I mentioned before, they're really focusing on customer intimacy. They really want to find a solution for a certain touch point within the customer journey. And AI can be used, but for different purposes. If you talk about operational efficiency, then of course you can talk about chatbots, because of course you want to lower the human interactions, because the less humans you need to employ, the more profitable it will be, because AI is cheaper, unfortunately, than human beings. But on the other hand, it can also be used for very mass scale repetitive tasks, especially in back office activities, where, for instance, RPA, which stands for, I think it was something like robotic process automation. So basically where you try to automate certain human tasks, but by using artificial intelligence and machine learning. But if you talk about AI for fintechs, of course, they really want to focus on a better client experience. So they will focus on solutions that will increase, for instance, personalization for customers. And for instance, in the sphere of WealthTech, you already have players that either try to personalize your investment plan, but they can also use, for instance, artificial intelligence or machine learning for selecting the instruments to outperform the markets, etc. So that's the distinction. If we talk about blockchain, and in fact, blockchain is not that new. I think a lot of banks were already looking at blockchains like 15 years ago. But honestly, I believe that blockchain can especially be used in enhancing security, because it's decentralized. Indeed, also in fraud detection or avoiding frauds and stuff like that. But you can also use that smart contracts, especially insurance players. They use it as smart contracts. So basically, it's just a contract which is automatically executed if a predefined set of conditions are met. But it can also be used by introducing blockchain. So there are a lot of possibilities, but unfortunately, within the boring financial industry, there's not a lot. There's not a lot of urgency to implement it.
That is really interesting. And Stijn, I know you recently went through the Artificial Intelligence Implications for Business Strategy program by MIT Sloan Executive Education. Can you share the latest trends and recommendations so we get some insider information?
Of course, I think the most important thing is that more and more artificial intelligence, but also machine learning, which is a form of artificial intelligence, it is integrated in the core business of companies. In the let's call it old days, it was only used, for instance, in chatbots, stuff like that. Most of the time, it's more like ancillary business. It's not really core business. But what you see more and more is that artificial intelligence is really used in the core business of every single company, also in the banking industry. Think about fraud detection, if you talk about any money laundering, stuff like that. Then another one, and that's also what I said when I talked about fintechs, is that indeed we shift more and more to AI-driven personalization. AI can easily be used if you have all the data points to offer much more personalized solutions to your clients than what could be done before. That's also there was a second trend. A third one, and that's also some good news. It's also the growing importance of ethical artificial intelligence and governance, because you can already see in Gen AI that there are concerns around bias, privacy, accountability. And they also said, okay, first we also need to think about a framework for AI. Who will be accountable? What do we need to do to protect privacy? But also, what about bias? You still have those biases about genders, races, stuff like that. And it's also something that should be overlooked. And that was one of the main topics within the course. And there's also a positive is that most of those professors, they were not convinced that AI would replace humans. They really believe that it will be a collaboration between AI and humans, and that it will also create new roles, new jobs. They also said, okay, it's hard to imagine what those jobs will be. They said, okay, you can also compare it to the beginning of the previous millennium, where maybe 50% of the economy was driven by agriculture. 100 years later, it's only a couple of percentage points. And still, if you see how many new jobs have been created, they predict, in fact, the same thing with AI. So they don't think that AI will overtake humans. Humans will still be needed, but it will be in close collaboration with each other. And then last but not least, and that's also something I mentioned so many times, is that AI should be aligned with your business goals. If your business goal is operational efficiency, then try to see where AI can support your business goal. If your business goal is customer intimacy and you're only going to use AI as a chatbot, which will deliver operational efficiency advantages, then there's a misalignment. So you should use AI where it can really support your business goals. So that was the last lesson from the course. But very interesting, and I recommend it to everyone.
Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing those insights. And it is a positive news that so many of those who are working with AI development are believing that it is not going to replace the human factor. However, for the moment, I see two different parts in this conversation. Those who believe that it will be this way, and those who see the danger and see how powerful and impactful it is getting, and how much is still outside of our understanding, and the understanding, deeper understanding of the outcomes is coming just with time. And oftentimes, even I can see it, it comes post factum when something happens, and then people start thinking about, okay, now we didn't think about this before, but how are we going to solve it and deal with it? So I'm sure it's going to be an interesting ride, and of course it will change the future and the world we're living in. So we're actually the lucky ones to see this transition and transformation with our own eyes.
This is for the second time in our lives, because we also were,
True.
I don't know, experiencing the internet, and nobody could stop the internet. And in my humble opinion, nobody will stop artificial intelligence, because it can add so many good things to our lives. So in fact, of fighting those kind of things, we should embrace it, look into it, see where we can benefit from it instead of trying to fight it. So
I agree. That's also a good way of seeing it, and we are the chosen ones in a way to go through such exciting times and live through these challenges and opportunities and all the innovation. What are some of the current challenges, speaking about the challenges, in the banking and fintech industry, such as regulatory changes or market volatility, and how can companies navigate them? And another question as well at the same time, how do you balance the short-term objectives with long-term transformation goals in this sensitive, high integrity and high risk industry?
a very good question, and maybe we can spend one session to it. So now I'm just going to be as concise as possible. First of all, regulatory changes are most of the time presented as a hurdle. I don't agree. In the first place, regulation is meant to protect consumers and to ensure market stability. So I think the most important thing that you can do as a bank is to embrace it, be proactive, implement it in a customer-centric way, and see it more as an enrichment instead of a hurdle. If you see everything from regulators as hurdles and you keep on fighting these, then in the end, you will lose the game against those that will embrace it, because they will be much, much faster to introduce new regulations in a very client-friendly way. So that's one thing. If we talk about market volatility, yeah, markets can be volatile. I think there are also global economic uncertainties. You have geopolitical events, but in the end, we've seen those every single, not every single year, but at least every single 5 years. It's, in my humble opinion, it's not new. It's not really a threat. I think the most important threat is that the long-term goals of a bank or a fintech, and especially traditional banks, are not aligned with their short-term behavior. And as I mentioned before, in my humble opinion, you should focus on either operational efficiency, product leadership, or customer intimacy. But the biggest mistake that you can make is to communicate to the outside world that, for instance, you're focusing on customer intimacy, but in the short term, actions, behavior is driven by operational excellence. Because you're only focusing, for instance, on cost income, and basically people are not stupid. It's not only investors that are not stupid. They will see the misalignment between short-term and long-term goals, but also customers will notice that the story that you tell as a long-term goal is not in line with your actual behavior. And I think that's the biggest risk and biggest threat to the financial industry. And I don't have any problems that companies say, okay, we just want to improve operational excellence, but then just communicate it and act accordingly instead of communicating something else and then acting differently.
I agree. That's true. And that is really important. Clarity and consistency They are always creating more trust, and trust is the core of any business. How do you envision the future of banking and fintech, and what should companies do now to prepare for upcoming trends and shifts?
What I expect is much more digital transformation, integration of new technologies such as AI, blockchain. Another one is indeed open banking, where you see much more fintechs creating one platform where you, in fact, have the same offering as a traditional bank. Those are things that will happen. It will go slow. I don't believe in a kind of digital revolution within the banking sector. It will be evolutionary, but doesn't mean that you shouldn't prepare for it. And I think the best way to prepare for it is looking at people. It's like you should focus on hiring the right talent, but you should also focus on avoiding cultural inertia, being too conservative, too risk averse, not open for new technologies. No, you should introduce a culture of innovation, continuous learning, agility, because that will be needed if you want to transform in a digital way. I think customer centricity will become very important, even for banks. Now they can still play on operational efficiency, but I think customer centricity, especially with more and more fintechs, will maybe become the strategic driver for the future. And then last but not least, what I mentioned before is if you really want to be ready and you're open-minded, is like stay ahead of regulatory changes. Embrace it and ensure that all your operations are compliant with regulation. Don't try to fight it. Embrace it like you should embrace new technologies. It's like you should also embrace new regulation, because regulation, it's not to bully banks. It is meant for protecting consumers. And that's something that banks should understand.
Absolutely. That sounds really good. And I would like to keep this conversation going, but I see that it's time to wrap it up. So, the last question: what advice would you give to leaders who are struggling with their transformation journey?
I believe everything starts with a clear vision. It's like try to define what your vision is for your company, even for your industry. You can always practice with your family to see if everything is clear, because if they understand your vision, employees will understand as well. But if you talk about vision, it's also about purpose. It's not only the what, it's also why. So what is your place on this planet? Why on earth are you existing? So it's not only vision, it's vision and purpose, because purpose becomes much, much more important than before. Another lesson is that you should focus and prioritize a couple of new initiatives rather than focusing on everything at the same time. I think sometimes it's easier to have a few quick wins, because those quick wins, it's also a way to convince people, especially because you're not going to convince everyone at the same time. Maybe at the start, because that's also the definition of a leader. A leader is someone who is followed. Maybe at the start, maybe 20% of the people will follow you. It's like the early adopters. But the mass markets, but also within the company, can only be convinced when they see tangible effects of the new strategy. So if you focus and you prioritize a couple of quick wins where people can see the effective realization of a new strategy, then you will also win the hearts of much more people than you did before. I think that's also an important one. But you should also focus on introducing a culture of innovation, continuous learning, but also giving the right example. It's like, don't act as if you are perfect. Show vulnerability, show people that you also make mistakes, but also show people that you learn from your mistakes, and they should, in fact, do the same thing as you do. So, and then last but not least, it's all about empathy. It's like active listening. You also need to understand what the concerns are, the needs are of the people working for you. It's not only about your strategy. People should understand your strategy. And if they don't understand, or there are concerns that they might face a potential job loss, then it's up to you to take away those concerns or to find a solution for those concerns and needs. So it's not only about the strategy, it's also about the culture, but also about yourself, listening to people, understanding people's needs, concerns, and helping them out of this world. So basically, for me, those are the most important lessons I can give to people.
Thank you so much, Stan. I'm absolutely in love with our today's interview, and thank you for sharing your wisdom, your experience in such a generous way. I'm sure it is going to help so many of those who are listening to us and watching this interview to surmount their challenges and move forward in a more impactful and powerful way. Thank you so much for being here with us today.
It was an honor to be here. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on Digital Transformation for Humans. I am Amy, and it was enriching to share this time with you. Remember, the core of any transformation lies in our human nature, how we think, feel, and connect with others. It is about enhancing our emotional intelligence, embracing a winning mindset, and leading with empathy and insight. Subscribe and stay tuned for more episodes where we uncover the latest trends in digital business and explore the human side of technology and leadership. Until next time, keep nurturing your mind, fostering your connections, and leading with heart.